This is where the World Schools final is being held, right? Not the World Schools Chamber.
That is correct. It will be in the main meeting room.
Okay. Thank you.
I think everybody's here. Are we good to start?
I know everyone from Proposition's here, so we're chilling in that sense.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good to start whenever the opposition side gets here, except I know basically nothing about this event. I am a policy and PF debater. Yeah, just please instruct my ballot. I am like one rung up from a parent judge in the context of this round. I am a flow judge, so I'll vote off that as much as I can and just make sure that my ballot is clean, because whatever gets me to the ballot the easiest, I will vote for, no matter the format. You know. I'm fine with speed. Just make it clear, signposts, give roadmaps, stuff like that.
Do you want us to send speaker orders before we start?
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, I'll start the round once all the opposition speakers get here.
Ethan Checkerizian.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I just sent like a message like my teammate.
If everybody's ready, I think we can get started. You guys are fine, right? All right, perfect. My name is Jake Sang, he, him pronouns. I'll take POIs verbally, please. And is anyone not ready? I'll just get started.
Yeah, sorry, what's a POI?
Okay, so POI is like when your opponent stands up in the middle of your speech and then says POI, and if you accept it, they like ask you a question or make a statement, and then you have to respond to it.
Okay.
So it's just like it's in place of cross-ex in a normal debate event, but in World Skills, you have to cross. Okay, perfect. You got it?
Thank you. Yep.
All right, let's get started. Religion is and always will be an influence on the country of America. From the phrase "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance to all elected officials uttering "so help me God" before being sworn into office, there's absolutely no doubt that our theistic beliefs will always play a role in our country's influence. When we have the opportunity to ensure that this very important institution functions as it should be, we have no choice but to propose today's motion. This House believes that a nationalistic ideal of religion is good for the United States. I'll do two things for you in this speech. First, I'm going to introduce a couple of keynotes on the framing of this debate before getting into our first two substantive points. My partner Ethan will then be giving you the third. First, on the framing of this debate really quickly then. Firstly, we believe that the nationalization of religion means that the most popular American religion, which is Christianity, becomes a bigger part of the national identity and has more influence over things like politics, governance, and public opinion than it has in the status quo. Secondly, we would all characterize for you that more importantly, that the nationalization of Christianity would necessarily also come with more bias to Christianity. We'd outline three reasons why this is the case. First, if it's part of the American identity, that just means that more people will buy into it as a whole. Secondly, if it plays a bigger role in the politics, then the people who are politically involved are more likely to know about it and learn about it. Thirdly, we'd also say that current religious officials are also more likely to push for its spread under the justification that is part of the national identity. Thirdly, though, thus the burdens crystallize as follows. Because the motion specifically asks us to discuss the impacts on America, our side simply has to prove that the benefits outweigh the possible harms of religion being a part of the national identity. Then side opposition just must simply prove the opposite. Our first substantive then is on the principle of good moral values. And the thesis of this argument is that the foundation of religions like Christianity is these positive moral values like kindness and compassion. 3 reasons why this is the case. First, religious doctrine is fundamentally based off of these values of kindness. They're entrenched in scriptures like the Bible itself and of the teachings of figures like Jesus. Secondly, the dedication of entire educational institutions for religious instruction is reflective of how these values are dispersed throughout society. That's why there's things like Sunday school and other institutions. Thirdly, though, religious scriptures also fundamentally include punishments for not following these beliefs. Generally, in addition to valuing positivity, religion also functions off the possibility of punishment. Why then is it morally correct for us to entrench these values within our society? We think that the nationalization of religion would fundamentally come with a core belief in these values. Because they're the backbone of religions like Christianity, they're going to play a massive role in our government. Why is that morally defensible then? We would say that society being good and kind is morally justified. We're currently seeing massive divisions in the status quo between races, classes, and even opinions. Uniting in belief of a few core values like kindness is morally preferable to any alternative. Note that in this debate, this principle level functions on a higher plane a priori to any pragmatic considerations of this motion. That means don't let side opposition get away by responding to this argument pragmatically. They have to engage on a principle and moral level. That also means, Judge, that this argument can function as an independent path to ballot for side proposition in this debate. Even if the pragmatic level of this debate becomes a wash, you can cleanly vote for us off of this principle. Now, before I get into the second substantive argument, are there any points on the other side of the house? All right, I'm just going to get into it then. The second substantive argument we have is on accountability. The thesis of this argument is that in either world, you're going to have buy-ins to Christianity and you're going to have a large presence of religion in the country of America. Look, when the vast majority of Americans are already Christian, already buying to Christian religious doctrine, that means that the abuses of the church and the bigoted perspective that side opposition is inevitably going to bring up are going to exist in either world, whether or not this motion is true or not. In that vein, then, our world is far preferable. Why is that necessarily true? It's because when you have more practitioners across America, religion gets more accountable, more diverse, and more successful because their diverse perspectives are going to get mixed into this existing religion and doctrine of Christianity. And Christianity is going to be exposed to the many opinions of Americans that makes it more diverse and more accountable than it is in the current world. We outlined for you 2 layers of analysis underneath this argument. The first is that more practitioners check bad practices from the church. We think that the reason why so many high up church leaders, as well as local level church officials, are never held accountable, no matter how many bad things they do, is because they can hold problematic beliefs and conduct bad practices in accordance with those beliefs because of a lack of outside interaction with these leaders and officials. That is to say, the people who may be able to witness these abuses aren't even there in the first place. And the only people who might see these abuses are their followers. And the followers already believe that they are perfect because they are backed by the religion itself, and they don't try to contest any of these leaders whatsoever. We think that nationalization brings more people into the fray of religion. That means that they makes these people more aware of any possible abuses that might be happening in the church. In our world, we get new followers who don't always buy into the teachings of the church automatically. Why is that so important, though? What that means is that they're more susceptible to actually finding the flaws within the church and actually holding them accountable for it. Whereas in the status quo, current priests and leaders can are shielded by the shield of divine righteousness from their followers who already believe that they're perfect and they're backed by religion. Secondly, though, it opens up more diverse beliefs. We would advocate that in the status quo, we recognize that religions like Christianity can easily give way to things like bigotry and a lack of open-mindedness. It's pretty sure that side opposition is inevitably going to bring this up here. But we recognize that these problematic beliefs exist in either world. But only in our world do we have the opportunity to change these beliefs. We'd give you 2 mechanizations as to how this could possibly occur. Firstly, diverse viewpoints can make their way into existing religious belief. We don't think that nationalizing Christianity is going to suddenly make Americans just lose their existing progressive viewpoints that they hold in the status quo surrounding things like equality and diversity. We think that these viewpoints are going to make their way into existing religious beliefs and are in turn more likely to influence other religious followers. With that said, then, are there any points on the other side of the house at this time? Okay, I'm just going to continue then. The second mechanization we see as to how this happens is that there's more awareness about bigotry as a whole. We think that on their side of the house, you're still going to have hyper-conservative religious people like the Westboro Baptist Church advocating for things like homophobia. Even if you prevent them from doing so in the political realm, because Christianity is not a part of the national identity, they're still going to hold these beliefs and they're going to spread these beliefs to their followers on either side of the house. Why do you prefer our side then? That means that you prefer our side because when religion is more prominent within America, these terrible perspectives are more likely to get recognized and called out when there's more practitioners with a variety of different beliefs and a different range of diverse perspectives. Let's just do a quick analysis on the comparative here on proposition. We would recognize, even if on their side, these religious leaders aren't espousing their views publicly in a nationalized religious realm, that doesn't stop them from spreading these beliefs altogether. What do they do on their side of the house then? We think they just continue to do so privately like they're doing in the status quo. That means they fuel things like hatred and bigotry within their individual church's sermons or Sunday morning worship. So on either side of the house, this bigotry is inevitably going to continue, but it's comparatively far worse on their side because you don't have the level of social accountability or the ability to point out hypocrisy that you otherwise do get on our side of the house. On their side, it also means you necessarily allow these things to perpetuate underground. On our side of the house, we're the only side that can make sure religion gets more diverse perspectives and that bigoted beliefs are exposed. That's why you prefer proposition. So proud to propose.
Okay, I am Paresh. I am the first speaker for side opposition. Is my judge ready? Sorry, I can't see video.
Yep, I'm ready when you are.
Are my opponents ready? Okay. Time will begin when I start speaking. I'm here to speak my truth on a subject that's divisive. It's nationalism and religion, two things that can ignite us. Nationalism and religion, they go hand in hand. Some say they're inseparable, while others demand a separation, a distinction, a way to coexist. But no matter what, they always seem to persist. Persist, they are, but separate they must. We're proud to oppose and move away from distrust. We have to realize here that there is a key argumentation that has been fully shoved by the proposition, but has completely gone against them. And today, we're going to be talking about that, which is why we're so proud to oppose. Now, what am I going to be doing here? First, I'm going to be going over the proposition's framework, then their two substantives, and then finally, moving on to our substantive 1 and substantive 2, my partner CJ will introduce the third. So let's go over their framework really quickly. So first, they mentioned that Christianity becomes a part of the national identity and that there's more bias to Christianity and that they have to prove that the benefits outweigh the harms. However, we would argue that adding bias to Christianity and having Christianity becoming part of the national identity would have more harms than benefits, and we'll go on to explain this, starting with their first substantive. Well, first, they start off with the principle of good moral values, and they talk to you about how Christianity supposedly has good moral values. Well, we also have to realize that in other religions, these moral values are still upheld. For example, other texts other than the Bible, such as the Quran or
POI
or other texts like the Vedas, give you an example of how good moral values look and how they are supposed to be.
POI.
I'll take that later. How they are supposed to look and an example of those. Now, moving on to their second substantive, they also say that there will be balance and that people will check Christianity due to social accountability. However, we would argue that the opposite would happen, as now since there is a heavier bias towards Christianity, and Christianity becoming the sole national, not the sole national identity, sorry, the sole religion and part of the national identity, that
POI.
these checks would be completely ignored. I'll take it later. That these checks would be completely ignored, because there's more bias to Christianity, less social accountability would happen, as Christians and Christian institutions can get away with more. I'll now take your POI.
Okay, no, what we're telling me here is that people don't lose their perspectives about diversity and equality as soon as Christianity becomes a national religion. They take those perspectives and they integrate it within the existing religious doctrine, and it's more likely for these abuses within Christianity to be called out. You never responded to that logic.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I had a bit of lag.
You never responded to our logic where we're directly telling you that more people buying into Christianity doesn't make them like give up their diverse perspectives. It just makes them like integrate those perspectives within Christianity, and it makes them more likely to call out bigotry. You never responded to that logic.
Okay, sure, more people can bring in their diversity, but also we have to realize that those in power inside of Christianity will be the ones who have the ultimate final say, right? We have to realize that at the end of the day, it's their actions that matter the most. And their actions will not change just because we all shift to Christianity. Just because more people come in with more diverse perspectives does not change the perspective of a few people in power. Now, by the way, I'll take that POI.
Okay, so even if you're saying that like these religious leaders are the ones who actually have power, if there's more followers that actually are willing to call them out, doesn't that mean they go out of power? Because the reason why they have so much power right now is because they're shielded by religious righteousness.
Okay, but you also have to realize you yourself conceded that we would have more bias towards Christianity and Christian leaders inside of your world, which means that they would be shielded by the nation itself, which is even worse in your world than the current world right now. So with that being out of the way, let's move to our first substantive, which is perception of religion. We have to realize that creating a nationalistic ideal of religion is problematic because it sets one religion as better than others. It doesn't matter if this religion embodies most of the people in the United States, because regardless, the people who do not believe in this nationalized religion are forced into corners.
POI.
We have two mechanizations. One, as a growing number of people in America become atheists, more and more people transition away from Catholic and other Christian faiths. Any connection between religion and nationalism would be seen as an attack on their beliefs. Second, we also have to realize that goals are shifted towards this nationalized religion, such as the public approval of the Bible and separation from Qurans and other texts that are not the specific religion.
POI.
Go ahead.
On either side of the house, you're going to have Christianity be the dominant religion and shut out all other religions. Only on our side of the house do you open up to more diverse perspectives and have the possibility that it becomes more open. On their side of the house, you're still going to have Christianity be the dominant religion, considering that the vast majority of Americans already follow it.
However, what you're arguing for is that Christianity becomes one of the sole religions and that we actively go against all other religions. What we have to realize here is that the world that the proposition is going for is one that shuts out other religions, and as opposed to right now, where sure, Christianity can be the dominant religion, but other religions still exist in the status quo, like Islam, like Judaism, etc. Now, second, this would also come with the goal of preserving Christianity by any means possible. This would look like more funding towards churches, approval of Christian leaders, and opposition of anyone who doesn't believe in those Christian leaders. This is also the internal warrant for how their side of the house achieves the nationalistic ideal of religion. So, what does this mean? Well, it would actually decrease diversity and increase hatred towards other groups, which means that it would negatively impact those who don't necessarily internally believe in Christianity. It means that they are now forced into a corner in which they have to keep their mouth shut in order to basically survive. Now let's move on to our substantive 2, which is the reaction to other religions. We also have to realize that this negatively impacts other religions, and we have two mechanizations to prove this. First, we have to realize that this actively harms other religions, such as Judaism and Islamophobia. This also impacts other religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., because we have to realize that intrinsically, when we accept Christianity as the sole religion in the United States and tie it to nationalistic ideals, We are also shutting out all other religions being a possible part or a contributing factor to the United States, right? What this essentially does, it's actively harming other people's diversity and beliefs, which means that side proposition actively increases this amount of like non-diversification and basically narrow-mindedness because they're actively supporting shutting out other religions. But we also have to realize that it increases xenophobia because now those who are not Christian and are from other nations, such as say India with Hinduism, people in the US would actively go against them. And with those populations living in the US right now, it's really it would be really detrimental because now Christians would actively go against these other people. So, Judge, you have to realize that nationalism and religion tying together is actually a really bad thing because having this one-mindedness is not what we should stand for, but we should stand for diversity. Therefore, we are so proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, so next up is the second proposition. So I'm ready to start time whenever the second speaker on AF is ready to.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Ethan. I'll take POIs verbally. Pronouns are he, him. Let me know if you're not ready. Otherwise, I'll assume you're ready. I'll go ahead and get started. Right off the bat, I want to make something really, really clear. Not a single second of the Op1 ever contested that the values of Christianity in a vacuum are a good thing and a good value to build America off of. All of the responses we get in the Op1 come with a lot of link analysis as to why Christianity ultimately doesn't result in the impact we talk about. But notice nowhere in the Op1 do we get any contesting about whether or not Christianity in the value itself is a good or a bad thing. Don't let them bring up any new responses in the Op2. They have effectively lost this link. We'll implicate why that's important later. In this speech, expect a few things. First, we're going to be defending our case. Second, I'll go over their case. Then I'll deliver our third substantive argument. So first, let's go to our case. Our first substantive was about Christianity having good moral values. They only give us one response here, as the moral values of other religions also uphold good principles. But we think that this debate mostly relies on people who are not religious in the status quo, i.e. people who are agnostic and atheists, having to comply to a lot more Christian values in a proposition world, which then leads to our downstream impacts of people being ultimately more moral citizens and all of the benefits that we talk about in the Proposition 1, our first substantive, that gets us absolutely no interaction here. I would also again like to point out they did not ever contest that the values of Christianity are a bad thing. They have conceded they're a good thing. This is going to be ultimately important because it's how we're going to win this debate at the end of the day. But then on our second substantive about increased accountability about the bigotry inside of Christianity, the only response we get here is that there's a heavier bias on Christianity, so there's less check. A lot of responses to this. First, we think that there not being a check on religion is a non-unique argument, right? Right now, Christianity has no check, and it still has a lot of power. We think that it is far preferable to side in a proposition world where Christianity is more mainstream and publicized and fundamentally built off of American values because it gets more attention, so people are more likely to check against all of the abuses associated with Christianity. Ultimately, we're winning both of our substantives pretty cleanly. They only give one response, both of them. They're going to be losing this debate pretty cleanly, already are pretty far ahead. Any points? I'll take them now.
Is kindness unique specifically to Christianity, or do atheists and agnostics also believe that kindness is a good thing?
I think that the thing that Christianity changes for a lot of people is deontological actions, right? I think people know killing people is bad, and I think people know kindness is good regardless of the religion. But what makes religious values special and how it changes the way people act is they're more likely to do kind things for their neighbor, like maybe they'll help an old person cross the street, different things like this that are ultimately going to be good things that are specific to if people are more religious, they're going to be more likely to take these actions because they have an incentive of wanting to go to heaven and things like that. Okay, let's go to their case. Start on their first substantive argument about the perception of Christianity. A few responses here. First, we think this is non-unique because Christianity already has a lot of publicization in America in the status quo. The differentiation here is that, like, right now, a lot of people believe in Christianity. There is a lot of Christian far-right groups that like are bigots in the status quo. So any checks about how Christianity having more power is going to ultimately lead to bad downstream impacts already exist in the status quo. The difference with our arguments, though, is that people have an incentive to check against the abuses of Christianity in a prop world. Why? Because if the country you call home is building the values of a religion you disagree with, you're going to be more likely to speak out against the religion, which is ultimately going to improve the bad parts of Christianity that the op is critiquing in this debate. But second response here, clarification that most of the new believers of Christianity in a proposition world are not going to be die-hard bigots who are believing in some very extreme Christian values, right? It's people who maybe might start going to church on Sunday, but aren't necessarily going to devote their life to Christianity in every way possible. So any of their impacts about why this increases the impact on other religions cannot be evaluated in today's debate because most of these new believers aren't likely to believe that way. But third response here is that they're not really giving us a link here, right? Just because more people believe in Christianity does not mean that the perception of Christianity is bad. It does not mean that Christians are more likely to do bad things. They don't ever warrant that at all, so you can't really evaluate it in today's debate. But then go to their second substantive argument about the reaction to other religions. Most of my responses to the first substantive will also impact here, right? Christianity is already abusing a lot of other religions, i.e. like a lot of persecution around the world. The difference here is all of the analysis we give you about our second substantive argument about increasing the accountability and checks against Christianity in a proposition world, because if, again, the country that you call home is supporting a religion you disagree with, or they're doing things that you disagree with, you're going to be more likely to speak out against it. That's ultimately going to be an important thing. But the third substantive argument that I'm about to give you will be directly responsive to how it impacts other religions. Our third substantive argument is about decreasing American imperialism. An important clarification that I think needs to be made in today's debate is that whenever religion becomes a nationalistic ideal of America, it also means they're legislating off of this ideal, right? So whenever the government is deciding whether or not they want to take a step about international imperialism and intervention abroad, they're going to account religion into the equation. What does this mean? When more people are voting off of their religion, they're going to be more likely to vote for politicians that express their religious beliefs as well. The important thing of how this applies to other religions and international relations is that the amount of conflicts America is involved in heavily decreases in a proposition world. Why? A lot of the imperialism that America goes through in the status quo is primarily economical. Invasions of the Middle East have to do with wanting to get bigger oil profits. But any proposition world where most of our values is based off of nationalistic religion, they're far less likely to make decisions off of what's going to cause them to get the most profit and most economic hegemony in with imperialism particularly. What are the impacts of this? Any reason why imperialism would potentially be bad, i.e. a lot of innocent children being bombed by American imperialism and status quo, is ultimately rectified because the incentive for American government to have more imperialism goes down in a proposition world. But second, there's a lot of impacts on other religions, right? Even though you're Christian, you're probably not likely to go invade Israel to try and take Jerusalem back or something like that, right? So there isn't a lot of downstream impacts on other religions. It ultimately causes a lot more restricted imperialism, but also we think that it would cause better humanitarian conditions abroad, right? Because an important clarification in this debate, a fundamental value of Christianity is helping your neighbor and doing the good thing when nobody is looking, right? This looks like providing more humanitarian aid to other countries and being a fundamental believer in helping other people. If Jesus were alive today, he would actually probably be pretty socialist, right? He would be willing to help a lot of people. Don't let the opposition tie you into any belief of Christianity, causing a lot of bigotry. Not only is that checked back, our second substantive proves, but it also decreases the incentive to do things like imperialism. Ultimately, it's why we're so proud to propose. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm ready for the second negative proposal.
All All right,
Whatever.
cool. Yep, that'll be me. Everyone good on the proposition? Cool. I'll take POI's visualization. Just hold up your hand or something like that. Nationalism and religion, it's a dangerous mix. Fueling hatred and conflict, that's not something we should risk. Nationalism at its core, it's a love for one country, but may also be twisted to a harmful ideology. Don't pursue this harmful future. Stand with opposition, not Lex Luthor. So, off the bat, I want to agree with Jake saying that he sets the burden that the opposition would prove an aggregate net harm compared to the nationalized Christianity, compared to the status quo. He also argues that policymakers will act upon this newfound nationalism within these religious beliefs, specifically for Christianity. Here's the problem. Popular Catholicism and other Christian sects have beliefs that against the LGBTQ community. He argues that those are non-unique since those beliefs exist in either world of the proposition or opposition. But he also argues that policymakers will act on those decisions. You can't say that people won't choose to believe these, and policymakers will act on the good things of Christianity, but won't act on the bad things. You can't argue for both sides at the same time. So because of that, those Christian beliefs specifically against the anti-LGBTQ community will only be acted on and will be made policy that will actually hurt that community as a whole. That's how religious nationalism works. Then Ethan argues that Christian values are a good thing in a vacuum, but kindness is not unique to Christianity. People still value kindness in other moral values in either world. Even if you're agnostic or atheist, kindness is never something you avoid. The only change is the negative values that are not commonly adopted outside Christianity, specifically within those of agnostics and atheists, as Ethan states. I'll take your POI.
I don't really see how you're saying that people aren't going to adopt the positive values of Christianity, but at the same time, like adopt the negative ones while not adopting the positive ones. What we're telling you, that even though, can I finish?
Yeah.
Thank you. What we're telling you is that even though like Christianity like isn't like the only religion that values kindness, it actually has a religious backing to these values. So even if people don't buy into like the religion itself right now, that's a problem because in Christianity, you actually have a religious backing to values like kindness. There's actually an increased backing behind kindness.
Yes, what I'm saying is that the argument is that obviously people will buy into the positive values, but they're already buying in, so there's not really significant net change. The net change is on the negative value, and people don't currently have those values, but they're going to increase it because of the nationalized Christianity. But then Ethan also furthers that beliefs will change because people will adopt Christianity and argue with those beliefs. But the Bible has existed for thousands of years, and people have disagreed with a number of those for just as long as it's existed. Yet, significant change has not been made in that time. Instead, the beliefs have persisted. Therefore, this would only increase the disputes, but would not actually increase change. He also argues that there will be less imperialism in the U.S. because of nationalized Christianity. But the very person who invaded the Middle East was George W. Bush, who was a Christian. That doesn't change anything at all. So with that being said, I'll take a point.
So we never argued that values like kindness was exclusive to Christianity, but now when you are an individual coming from a different religion and you're now able to be understanding of Christian values, why does that not bring greater religious thinking?
Because those religious thinking are still present in those other ones. They still value that kindness. Whether you be Islamic and you believe that kindness gives you paradise or any other religion, kindness is always a good thing that helps you in the long run with some sort of benefits. So with that being said, I'll move on onto our team's third substantive argument, that nationalism itself is a net negative. So here's the issue. This motion seeks to increase nationalism by weaving it together with religion. Well, everyone here today has argued that the weaving together is a net negative. Let me be the first to show how increasing nationalism as a principle is fully harmful. We have two mechanisms to prove this. First, how does national increase in the proposition's world? Well, since there are inevitably some Americans that are religious but not nationalistic, those people would then be pressured to adopt the more nationalistic ideals as the proposition proposes. As nationalism becomes more prevalent, groupthink would inevitably begin to take place, and nationalism would exponentially grow and increase within the U.S. Second, there'll be less discourse because only one narrative exists. Even if there's multiple sects, the narratives ultimately decrease from one of multiple religions to one of solely a Christian value. I'll take a POI.
Why do progressives give up their current values of equality and diversity as soon as the country becomes Christian? We're telling you that these people are just going to integrate these values into Christian doctrine.
yeah, the Bible has existed for thousands of years, and those values, in certain areas, are not extraordinarily prevalent. The difference with this is that people will become more Christian. They'll become more with those negative values. So because of that, they'll be trapped within a bubble of only one truth for Christianity. For example, on social media, when Republicans and Democrats only view their side of the political spectrum, they get trapped on believing only their side. Not only that, but Americans become content with harmful societal normalities because they're simply just part of America. An American first agenda will only further pressure the negatives of the nation. But why is that important? Because the impacts are twofold. First, principally, if the rest of the world ended poverty, and American nationalism would believe that America is the best country in the world, that thus poverty is actually a net positive for society, we should keep it around. Poverty is obviously something that we should work to fix, but American nationalism would suggest that whatever is happening in America is a net benefit. But on a more realistic level, that's been demonstrated in the past. This justifies immoral actions because people are willing to cross the line. This is only ever possible when A, the people are unified, and B, they only have one idea of how society functions. Take an example of Germany, Japan, and Italy during World War II. They were able to militarize and silence minorities because of this nationalism, despite it being anti-Semitic and actually hurtful towards a number of people. They'll always Jake Zhang argues that the opposition must prove a net harm in society, but I think Nazi Germany and anti-Semitism is a clear net harm for America and something that we should avoid. So, with that being said, nationalism and religion, it's a dangerous mix. Feeling hatred and conflict, that's not something we should risk. Ethan Wilkes, sit down, you got no defense. Voting side prop is a capital offense. With that being said, stand up and vote oppose.
All right, next up is the third proposition. So I'm ready for that whenever the third speaker is.
Perfect. Yeah, hi, my name is Ari Kareem, pronouns he, him, POI preferences verbal. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get started assuming and knowing that the draft is ready. Teammates, opponents, good to go? Perfect. I think that the lack of focus of proposition material was the downfall of side opposition right from the start of this debate. So because everyone on side opposition began each of their speeches and ended with their speeches with ChatGPT poems, I think there's something very important to say here. ChatGPT's poems are often quite trite, with rhymes that feel forced and not quite right. Their words fall flat with little depth or soul, leaving the readers feeling empty and alone. Their lines are stale with no real flair, their stanzas lacking in both structure and care. They may try to impress, but it's all in vain, for ChatGPT's poems, just like opposition's case, is nothing but mundane. A number of things to do in the speech. Firstly, go over refutation from what we just heard from side opposition, and then delve into the two questions and prove to you why side proposition comes out on top and why you consolidate and implicate your ballot. On refutation, I want to point out that right from the outset, that at our absolute worst case and taking opposition at their highest, even if people don't actually adopt Christianity, it is worth noting that people will be more considerate of Christian thinking, which is the dominant religion in the United States and the status quo. They will compare their moral compasses and values, its similarities and differences with Christianity, and do some comparing and contrasting of their beliefs compared to those of Christianity. I think, honestly, at the end of the day, if this is a side, or if this is the outcome that we have to defend, and even if we take and buy all of side opposition material, I think this is still a net good, insofar as people are no longer isolated to their moral compasses and they're more considerate about other religions. We think that's a net benefit because we think that religion crosses into multiple sectors of society. What does this mean? We think that people make decisions and act as moral agents on the basis of their religion, because that is one of the core components of a human being if they do practice one, because that is the moral values that they draw from. We think that because of this, so many actions in the status quo are taken on the basis of religion. Take political decisions, for example, even. We think that a lot of things that people strongly believe in and defend are based on those religious values. Insofar as people are now more considerate of multiple religious kinds of thinking, we think that'll make people more considerate about the way others think. We think that's a net benefit. And representative getting, our argument was never that kindness and other positive values was exclusive to one religion. Our argument was that people are now going to be able to understand that, hey, there are some values that I agree with from this religion. And even if I don't agree with a vast majority of it, even upon proposal of this motion, I think that still is a net benefit. And I still can now appreciate my neighbor or appreciate my classmate. I honestly think that is a net benefit on our side of the house. We just showed you a number of things, and we have completely refuted side opposition at their highest ground. What did we tell you? Jake and Ethan thoroughly refuted, and we already proved to you a number of things. No, thank you. On their sub 1 and 2, on perception of religion, right, where their sub 2 is essentially the same thing as their first piece of pause material. I think there are 2 things to say here. That number 1, people aren't going to become bigots or xenophobic to any degree whatsoever on our side. This assertion is remarkably uncharitable, and we don't get any analysis as to why the nationalistic idealization of religion leads to these things automatically. We also don't think that people are just going to discard all of their beliefs instantly and they're not going to shed it once they go to church, for example, right? We think that people are now just going to, we trust people and we trust individuals on our side of the house who have the logical capacity to actually consider whether or not they truly believe in something, understand what exactly they want to adopt and what they want to retain in terms of their moral compasses and values. Second thing to say is that I think the problematic thinking stemming from Christianity right now is composed of a small minority of Christians, right? For example, homophobia from the Westboro Baptist Church. And it is factually untrue that we're going to get those kinds of individuals increased on our side of the house. I think that it's just very, very important to note here that at the end of the day, the way that you actually end up garnering benefits in terms of thinking is when people understand what exactly is considered radical thinking and what exactly is considered a majority extent of ideology coming from Christianity. I think that we trust individuals to actually determine whether or not something is logically sound and whether or not it is socially acceptable. We think that for the vast majority of instances, the vast majority of people are going to be adopting the more realistic and more widely held beliefs of Christianity. Before I continue on to 2 questions, I'll take that point.
So since there will be policymakers that are able to make those decisions and more people will be inevitably pushed towards those extremes, how do policymakers have to act on those beliefs as they become more prevalent?
I'm not really sure what the premise of that POI is, because I just refuted and I just pointed out that people aren't going to be pushed towards those extreme ideologies or extreme areas of the religious spectrum. I think that policymakers are more incentivized to consider the fact that now they can't just base all of their actions and all of their policies and all of their decisions on one ideology, right? They can't just rely on their own moral compasses. Now, when people are more inclined to understanding different religious ideologies, such as Christianity, I think that now there's a greater incentive for policymakers to look at those religious beliefs and values and then consider how exactly it plays into their decisions. So, for example, if there's a Muslim lawmaker, then they're probably a lot more incentivized to understand Christianity as a whole. We think that there's just more religious diversity in that sense. 2 questions then. Number 1, which side best promotes greater thinking about religious ideals, values, and adoption? This clash engages directly with our first piece of pause material, where we explain to you that Christianity is based on positive virtuous values on a principled basis. That number 1, there are religious doctrines and scriptures that are literally ingrained in things like the Bible that people read. 2, there are educational institutions like Sunday school, which disperse those values and make sure that people are understanding about them. And 3, that there are punishments for misdeeds and bad behaviors. And so there won't be unchecked, rampant, hate crimes and that kind of thing, because that's simply not espoused by those religious doctrines and scriptures. I think that this very implicit concession, the fact that Christianity was never actually contested to be a bad religion, we think in and of itself is a reason to introduce Christianity as another mode of religious thinking. What this means is that even if people don't actually adopt Christianity, and even if people don't shed any of their moral values, we think that at least you'll have greater exposure to them on our side of the house. The impact here is remarkably simple. We think that people are going to be more appreciative of those Christian individuals that they know in their life. And we think that because of that, now they're going to be able to better relate to them. Second question then, which side best improves accountability metrics to religion? Before I continue, I'll take another POI if there's one.
Since the U.S. Congress recently voted on the Equality of Marriage Act, and over 30% of congressmen decided against that act, how does that not prove that a lot of the homophobic beliefs of Christianity are not prevalent and would become more prevalent in America?
Okay, 2 problems with that POI. Number 1, there just was not any establishment that the reason as to why exactly these Republican lawmakers voted against it was based on their Christian values, right? I think that number 2, on our side of the house, people are now, when they are considering Christianity, even if that POI premise is true, we think that now they're better able to like actually understand that like they have to like change their way of thinking. If the vast majority of like new individuals that are exposed to Christianity point out that this is a bad aspect of the religion, we think that people can still criticize and people can still critique that certain aspect of the religion. And we think that then when people understand that, especially when the Republican lawmakers see that level of criticism on certain aspects of a religion, we think that now their constituents are now more incentivized to actually engage with that. We already told you that like this clash engages with like our second and third substantive. We told you a number of things here, that you check bad practices, right? Insofar as Christianity has a ton of sects, some like that are ideating like harmful beliefs and values, we think that we check against that because now you're going to have people criticizing and pointing out that this aspect of the religion is wrong. That exactly answers the POI that we just heard. Second thing that we told you is that you diversify religious beliefs because now people can adopt values and ideas
That's
from
actually
other
time.
religions, and we think that as a whole, that's why we're proud to propose.
All right, this is the third op proposition. I'm ready to start the timer on your first word.
Right. Hello, everyone. Akon, verbal POIs, please. All right. Everyone good? All right. 3, 2, 1. In this speech, no poems, no BS, no silly business. It's time to get down to arguments. Top level issues in this speech. Expect few things. I'll be going a little bit fast. 1, I'll analyze the framing debate and the debate on our side. First, second, I'll be doing 3 clashes, top level line by line. Third, there'll be ballot coverage, how your ballot should be framed. Now, onto the framing debate. On the framing debate, one thing is contextual insofar as we ensure that like the framing is going to be based specifically on the United States and how the United States is going to be governed by this nationalistic ideal of religion, i.e. we assume that the United States is going to have some form of Christianity ingrained in and of itself, and how every policymaker or any action being taken through the government will be taken through this specific moral political stance. 2 problems with their argumentations on this is that 1, they say Christianity is in its essence good as a form of governance. There's major problems with this insofar as we assume that Christianity has major sects. CJ handled that in the last speech. I'll explain how that materializes in this round. Insofar as there's different extrapolations of what Christianity entails, means that you can't actively get to one form of moral decision making, even under a form of Christianity or a form of religious decision making. I.e., if you assume, or in Arik's word, give it to a Muslim politician or any other form of politician, every politician is going to have a different viewing and understanding of Christianity. At that point, it becomes moot to assume that Christianity is going to be able to be assumed as a good form of governance in its essence. That causes a few top level problems. 1, it decks all of their solvency insofar as there's no fundamental need for like this moral decision making to happen in the second place. Second, it decks the ability of moral decision making to happen in the first place because we assume that moral decision making cannot function if there's no actual consensus on what the morals or deontological stances are, insofar as there's hundreds of different forms of Christianity and no form is actually agreed over. Second, even if you assume that, oh, we're going to be listening to this very specific church on Christianity, there's different extrapolations of the Bible and different things that are constantly changing, which means our identity and ideology of this doesn't matter. They say we provide no argument as to why Christianity is intrinsically bad. The argument is that even if Christianity in its essence is good, the fundamental idea that there's no proper way to understand Christianity in its essence is the problem that moots all other solvency. At that point, you're voting neg on presumption. But next, let's go on to our first 3 clashes. Our first clash is there a primary need for national identity of religion? Top level issues that the proposition has provided you with absolutely 0 reasons as to why we fundamentally in the status quo need to move over and completely shift the United States form of governance towards a national identity of religion. There's some problems with this insofar as the United States is fundamentally doing just as fine as it is right now with a variety of religions, separating religion from the government as much as it can. The idea is that you don't need a new form of religion insofar as moral decision making is still being made in the status quo. They provide examples of how like, things are eternally bad in the status quo, but there's no reason as to why that can't happen in the propositions world, and politicians justify that using the Bible insofar as there's no actual understanding of what the Bible entails, which means at the top level issue, there's no ballot story for the AF. But now, clash 2, does having Christianity defining our national identity have a positive or negative impact? We'd say it's negative. We're going to be like link turning all their imperialism arguments that they're 3 literally kicked out of, but there's going to be there was a top level link turn by CJ in the last speech. I'll explain. First, a nationalistic ideal of religion can be used to justify imperialism and colonization of other countries. An example, in the past, European powers used to spread Christianity as justification for their imperial expansion, claiming that it was their duty to bring the true religion to other parts of the world. They say Christianity is good, and even if we assume that Christianity is good, nothing stops bad politicians from utilizing Christianity as something that it tells people to do. They can't fiat out of the fact that politicians are just going to be good and listen to Christianity all of a sudden. No, politicians still have their internal motives to take actions insofar as they utilize Christianity and the benefits that they're going to be showing as Christianity to use misuse and used for bad things, which means that it leads to the suppression of local religions and cultural practices and exploitation and abuse of colonized people. Imperialism is worse than other models. Second, a nationalistic idea of religion can be used to maintain control over imperial territories. For example, powers have imposed their religious beliefs and practices on people in order to maintain control and dominate their cultural and religious identity. This leads to suppression of local religions and cultural practices, creates a sense of alienation and resentment among the people, which means when we go to the Middle East and bomb them for an oil in the status quo, we see that in the world of the proposition, it happens at much higher rates. We're still going to be bombing them for oil. Nothing in the proposition says that we're not just move away from, no, not taking the point. We're not going to move away from the economy. The top level issue is that we're still going to be doing things for the economy. It's just that our model of governance is going to be fundamentally Christian, i.e. when we go through this fundamental model, we see that there's terminal impacts where politicians use Christianity to justify these practices and get oil in the first place, which means that all of their arguments on that are non-unique, but using Christianity as a model terminally makes it worse because these politicians get motivated in more and cause more imperialistic ideologies that causes problems in the Middle East in the first place, which is the root cause. And finally, the religion can be used to maintain a sense of superiority and entailment among the powers. This includes arms sales to tons of other countries just because it seems like the right thing to do under the model of Christianity, which imperializes and causes situations to get worse. But next, there's a top level issue that like terminalizes the debate on the imperialism page, is that a national religious identity has negative consequences for IR. When a country's religious identity is tied to its national identity, it can lead to narrow-minded and insular worldviews, which damages diplomatic relations and relations and hinders cooperation with other countries, i.e. even if you assume that the United States intrinsically is going to be good as a model of Christianity, we don't assume that other countries are going to get along with us equally as well. For example, if you look to the Middle East and look to like the United States, clearly two different forms of religious governance, we see that the tension between the two regions is terminally going to increase under the world of the proposition, which has a terminal inevitable impact that extends onto war and should be the biggest impact in this round. But third clash is a national religion, a better model of governance domestically. I'll provide you with 12 mechanizations on this. One is the nationalistic ideal of religion promotes intolerance and discrimination towards those who do not adhere to the dominant religion. We quantified this in our last speech as to how it causes people to like be narrow-minded in terms of what we justify. Even if Christianity in its essence is good, we don't actually view diverse viewpoints because we don't understand that other religions should be equally integrated in our model of governance, which causes problems on a terminal level. Second, it leads to suppression of minority religions, culture practices. 3 point is that creates a sense of exclusion and alienation for those who do not fit the dominant religious narrative. 4 point is that undermines the separation of church and state, leading to the blurring of lines between religious doctrine and government policy that makes government policy uniquely bad. And 5th point is that it leads to the promotion of certain religious beliefs and practices over others, leading to a lack of religious pluralism that is critical to effective governance. 6th point is that creates an environment where people feel pressure to conform to certain religious beliefs and practices in order to fit in with the dominant group. 7 point is that leads to a lack of religious education and understanding. People may be exposed to Christianity, and even if that's good, the people aren't exposed to other religions, which causes tension among sects. And 8th point is that it fuels divisive and polarizing rhetoric, leading to further societal divisions, i.e. Christian politicians will say, oh, I'm Christian, vote me in, and that causes polarization in the government, and especially in a country that's already polarized. 9 point is that it leads to the exclusion of people from certain government positions or opportunities based on their religion, which means that like certain people like Muslim politicians would not want to conform to Christianity and stops them from actively engaging the government, which causes our essence to get worse. 10 point is that it leads to the erosion of individual autonomy and freedom of conscience, which is an intrinsic value of the United States. 11 point, it creates a lack of representation and voice for minority religions. The political process is similar to the 8 point. And 12 point is that it leads to a lack of recognition and understanding of the cultural and religious diversity within the country, which terminally leads to significant problems that makes the situation worse. I'll do the top level issue in all of their arguments, and the line by line is that they say which side creates positive values, but there's fundamentally no reason for positive values. And second, it's mooted by the fact when they concede that Christianity has various sects, which means an understanding of Christianity is going to be fundamentally flawed across the United States, which means they're not going to be improving accountability, and there's no warrant on their second clash. Top level issue is that Christianity as a model is fundamentally flawed. It's an easy ballot on presumption, but we gain offense insofar as Christianity and utilizing Christianity as a model of national governance leads to problems within our political process and leads to problems with the international process. Easiest snag ballot of your life.
Okay, I'm Paresh. I'll be giving the reply speech for the opposition. Just whenever my judge and opponents are ready, I'll start. Okay. My time begins on my first word. Judge, it's a clear ballot for the opposition here, as our third speaker put it quite well. We win on all our clash points, and I'll be going over that once again. So first, again, the first clash point was: is there a primary need for a national identity of religion? And the matter of the fact is that Prop never proved exactly why we need it. Don't let them bring it up because they never proved it in the first place, right? Second, our second clash was: does having Christianity define our national identity have a positive or negative impact? We say it's negative because nationalistic ideals of religion can be used to justify imperialism, right? Which turns their whole entire argument of imperialism on towards the opposition. Second, again, we talk about how nationalistic ideals of religion are used to maintain control over colonies and imperial territories. And then finally, whether how nationalistic ideals of religion can be used to maintain a sense of superiority and entitlement. And we also talk to you about how it has negative consequences on international relations, right? And then in Clash 3, as Akon said, there are 12 basically mechanizations that prove why we win on that third clash of whether national religion is a better model of governance domestically. So let's go over a brief overview of our three substantives again, right? First, we talk about in our first substantive how exactly this this perception of religion in the prop world would actually be a negative thing, because now goals are shifted towards this nationalized religion, which means that it's easier to justify things under the Bible rather than having some sort of checks and balances in terms of how exactly we look at it, right? And it also promotes this separation of Christians from other people because of the fact that simply since Christian is now the sole religion and everyone has to have some sort of belief in Christianity, it means that essentially what is going to happen is people who were previously belonging to other religions or previously atheists, it's clear that they're going to be they're obviously going to not be seen in the same light as people who were previously Christian, and so it creates a sort of separation and xenophobia alongside other forms of discrimination that make it basically clear how having a nationalized religion would be a negative thing. Then we also tell you again exactly how that looks by looking to anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia as to how it negatively impacts other religions and other beliefs. And we tell you that it would actually hinder the the diversification that the proposition supposedly vouches for, because of the fact that now the bias is shifted towards Christianity and Christian leaders, which essentially creates this narrow-mindedness that the proposition just can't get out of, right? Because all they're doing is focusing on Christian ideals strictly, which has a negative impacts inside the US and with our international relations with other countries. And then finally, in our third substantive, we tell you exactly why nationalism in and of itself is bad, right? We talk to you about how nationalism increases in the proposition's world, right? And that only becomes worse because only one narrative now exists, one under Christianity, and how that again moots diversification, and how that leads to more nationalism, and exactly why in the past we've proven that nationalism justifies immoral actions because people are willing to cross the line. Judge, we have to realize here that having nationalized religion doesn't necessarily change the beliefs of politicians, nor will it allow them to get but it will allow them to get away with these horrible things that are being committed. Thus, Judge, it is clear that opposition is the way to go. Thank you.
All right, now for the proposition reply, I'll start Tom on your first word.
Okay, everybody, that's Jake saying back again here with the proposition reply. And if everybody's ready, I'll get started. All right, looks good. I'm not going to be giving you a fancy rhyming intro like the opposition has throughout this entire debate. But even though I won't be spitting any bars, I'll be spitting quite a lot of facts in this speech. Here's some facts for you. Not once has the opposition contested that Christianity is morally justified with positive values. Not once has the opposition contested that we're going to have more diverse buying in to Christianity. Not once has the opposition contested either of these two things for these reasons we're so proud to propose. I'm going to give you two separate paths to the ballot proposition in this speech. First on the principle and then on the practical. I'll prove to you why you should sign your ballot proposition on these issues. First is on the principle. We're the only side in this debate that's actually made a real principle push. We give you our first substantive argument where we told you that the values of Christianity are based on kindness and compassion, which is morally defensible. They only give you 2 pushes on this point. First, as they told you, other religions are upholding these beliefs. We would tell you this is totally non-responsive and totally non-topical. We never said that we only support Christianity. The only reason why we're talking specifically about Christianity is because it's the largest religion in America, and this motion is about nationalizing religion within the United States. It's only logical that we're talking about Christianity here. Secondly, they told you these beliefs already exist without religion. Ethan already gave you this analysis. People know in the status quo that helping others is good and harming others is bad, but they still take bad actions. But we think that religion creates a better backing for these positive beliefs because like they have a belief that's like, oh yeah, I'll go to heaven if I'm kind. There's no like other backing for those beliefs in the status quo. Even if people know that being kind is a good thing, they won't always follow up on that because there's no like eternal backing for that. Thirdly, they throw out this random thing in their last speech where they're just like, oh, never prove me a national identity for religion. That's just totally false. They totally just like ignored our entire case where we prove that to you. Don't let them just say, oh yeah, they never like met the burden of proving why we need national religion. We literally did that through our entire substantive case. But secondly, though, what are passive ballots on the practical level of this debate? We told you that because religion values kindness is pragmatically beneficial to society and the United States foreign policy, like Ethan told you about. What were their 3 responses to this? First, they start off by saying Christianity has bad beliefs. I'm just going to address this one once and for all because opposition really has ignored every single piece of substantive material that we've given you on this. Every single bigoted belief that is seemingly upheld by Christianity is based on a misinterpretation of the Bible. Not once is it mentioned in the Bible that homosexuality is forbidden. Not once is abortion specifically forbidden by the Bible. So then why in the status quo can people use biblical justifications for these issues? We tell you the only reason why people can misinterpret the Bible and have popular support from these like Christians is because there isn't enough buying into Christianity so that people actually understand what the Bible says about these issues. We gave you 2 mechanizations in our second substantive where we told you we get better beliefs and better accountability. Note that this literally turns their entire case and takes out all their offense. Every single harm they outline about the intolerance of Christianity can be fixed when we introduce these new perspectives and we can reduce the religion to its fundamental core where people value kindness and they value compassion. That takes out all of their impacts about Christianity being bad because we're the only side that can fix that, where they never engage with our reasoning about how intolerance exists on either side. Secondly, they give this response that just says like, oh yeah, Christianity is intolerant. We're just not going to say that this is true. Firstly, they say that like Muslim politicians just can't run for office. We're not telling them we're shutting out all non-Christians. If they want to be continuing to involved in politics, they can. Secondly, though, we would say this is totally untrue because existing perspectives can blend with religions. Just look at the existence of syncretic religions in the status quo. They literally exist as blending between 2 different types of beliefs. Look to Shintoism, where Japanese folk religions blended with Buddhism, or Voodoo, where Native African animism blended with Christianity. There is a possibility for blending under our side. Thirdly, though, they give me this response that's just like, oh yeah, religion can be used as a justification for imperialism. But living like in the 1800s, because I don't remember the last time someone used religion as a justification for colonialism. Religious colonization is implausible because of geopolitics in the status quo. There's different powers now, like China and the US. If we get like really abusive, then another power can come and check in for that. What we're specifically telling you is that the US can exploit other countries for resources, or we're telling you that religion eliminates that. So proud to propose.
All right, good round. I'll finish up typing the ballot. Yeah. Thank you for giving me good ballot instruction, because this is my first time ever interacting with World Schools. And yeah, have a good one. Unless y'all have any questions for me, but I'm not allowed to disclose, so I don't know if you would.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Parker, since the tournament is over, can we disclose ballots now?
I think it's to wait till awards, but I don't know for sure. But I left some feedback on the ballot. I'm not able to leave too much because I'm not too familiar with the format. But yeah.
Thank you then.
Have a
Thank
good one.
you.
All right, thank you.